Hey guys, welcome back to The Works. You could see full episodes of The Works before they air on our Patreon page. Just visit the link below to sign up. I hope you enjoy the interview and stay tuned.
I don't want the neighbors to get irked.
Is it just the dog, or do you have all the cats there too?
I have cats. I have two big dogs. I have cats. There's cats around here somewhere. Okay, wait, hold on. Just wait there. Hold on. I'll show you something. Feast your eyes on that.
What's
Yeah.
his or her?
It's a girl. Her name is Lewis. And then there's a little boy kitten running around here somewhere. I decided, because the world is so just horrible right now that I just decided to get some kittens.
You can never have enough kittens.
It really does help, I have to say.
So, folks, we got something really exciting for you today. She is a legendary comedian. She has been called a well-liked member of her kindergarten class, a Flibberty Gibbet, and is included in Comedy Central's list of 100 greatest stand-ups of all time. You know her from her comedy specials like Cats, Cops, and stuff, and being the political correspondent to The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, or as a panelist on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Today, you can find her on tour, coming to a theater near you, or her books, There's Nothing in This Book I'm Meant to Say, and The Totally Unscientific Study of the Search for Human Happiness, both available on Amazon and Audible. And of course, her hilarious podcast, Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to welcome Paula Poundstone onto The Works.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Well, I mean, the truth is, I'm really just sitting on my bedroom floor. I am.
Right in that intro there, I got those list of academic references you feature on your website. Keen-eyed observers will note that you were not listening to your English 3 teacher. You were not handing in your written assignments. What was going on in 1964 where you were just not doing the work?
Wait, it couldn't have been 1964. That had to have been 1974.
74? Let me check.
Yeah, I think.
7164.
That's just weird. Okay, because in 64, I might have just started. I might have been in kindergarten in 64. I was not a great student by the time I was in high school. I was just kind of a miserable wretch who wandered the halls like a ghost. And now I try to like read the stuff that I was supposed to have read. I mean, I think I've done most of it by now, come to think of it, because many years have gone by. But I did, like, right after high school, go through this phase where I tried to read all the stuff I was supposed to have read in high school, tried to make up for the miserable waste of an education that I was.
I did the same thing with Shakespeare, and I trudged through it.
I still can't read Shakespeare. I swear to you. We used to have these textbooks, or books with the Shakespeare plays in them in high school that would have. I think they were published by Signet. I think, I can't swear to it, but it would have the text of the play on one page, and on the opposite page, it would be like an explanation of what was said on that page. I couldn't understand either page. I just feel Shakespeare is not talking to me. It's like when parents spell in front of their children because they don't know what, they don't want them to. That's what Shakespeare's doing. Like, he's like sort of whispering behind my back. Whereas Charles Dickens practically writes "Dear Paula" at the top of the page. So I don't want to go where I'm not wanted. So Shakespeare, you just hold on to that, prithee and thou.
Are you are you still a fan of Charles Dickens?
Oh yeah, still my favorite author.
Out in Port Jeff, I don't know if you're ever on Long Island, or when you come here on Long Island, they have a Dickens Fest every winter here.
Oh, wow.
in Fort Jeff, and all of the townspeople dress up as like characters from like A Tale of Two Cities and like all of his work.
Oh, that sounds like fun. I
Yeah,
love that.
it's something different, something to celebrate, literature and is very lost these days. So
Well, has there ever been, you think about uh, uh, what's the matter with me? What's the Christmas story? A Christmas Carol. You
Christmas
think about
Carol.
a Christmas Carol, and it's been told so many times in so many ways. It's referenced everywhere. I mean, rarely has a piece of literature influenced culture to the degree that Charles Dickens' novel did. Uh, he wasn't a great writer of women characters, unfortunately, but maybe that was reflective of the time. I don't know. There was, well, except for who is it? Miss Havisham, was that her name? Or yeah, Miss Havisham.
Yeah, yeah.
the
Let's
the,
just get back
uh,
into memory.
the rich jilted heiress, I think it was, who sat in a wheelchair all day in front of her wedding cake. That was pretty brilliant.
You had this is kind of jumping ahead a bit, but you had a similar comment about women characters when everybody on your podcast read Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh yeah. We have a book club on Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. We don't do it every week. We'll do the book club through a whole book, and then we'll stop for a few weeks, and then we'll do it again. Do another book. And so the most recent book we read was Dracula, and yeah, they are a little the first of all right, a large bat flew towards you. You have holes in your neck. You're tired all the time. Do you think maybe something happened? They weren't women to read the room very well. But and actually, the character in the book, the woman that's celebrated the most, is Miss Mina, and the thing that she does that they're most excited about is type.
Yes.
She types up all their notes, and they're just blown away by that. So I have a friend who can type 70 words per minute, and I mean, since high school she could do that. And her mother said to her, "Don't ever let anyone know you can do that," because she would end up being a typist.
Yeah.
Which was really a great point. So she just uses a chisel, like on the Flintstones, just chisels all the words that she has to write, and no one asks her to do that.
That's right. Do it as slow as possible. No one will
Yeah.
would have taken advantage of you. It's so funny you bring up the women characters. Earlier this year, we have in Huntington, actually, we have this beautiful cinema arts center over here, and it caters to like old films and foreign films and indie films. It's great. And they were showing Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, and one of the women characters like starts yelling that there's a corpse walking around town, and someone should do something about it. And she gets the least bit hysteric, and this every man like slaps her around, is like, no, shut up. And it's like she's seeing a walking dead guy.
Well, I'll tell you something. Times have not changed all that much, because when women kept saying, Roe v. Wade's going to get overturned, right? There were a lot of men, and some of the men are allies, but there were a lot of men that went, "Oh, you know what? No, don't be silly. That you rest your pretty head. That's not going to happen." And guess what?
Yeah.
And the same thing, because they're not going to stop at Roe v. Wade. They're going,
They're going to end marriage equality. They're going to go for after everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Contraception. I love Bette Midler's take on contraception. She says, let's see if it's, oh gosh, I can't quote it exactly. It's something about, if it's God's will that, women have babies, then then there should be no Viagra because it's your limp dick is God's will as well. I think,
She's got a point.
I think she's got something there.
She's got something there. That kind of is a beautiful segue, honestly, because one of the things that you got, I mean, really known for was covering the RNC and DNC back when you were with the Tonight Show. When you look back at those conventions compared to, I mean, we're literally in the middle of the RNC now. I mean, could you read the tea leaves then? Could you see where things were heading?
No.
No.
And, part of the reason that I think so, for those who don't know, I covered the conventions for the Tonight Show back. This is a long time ago. It was during the Bush Clinton race, and that's the first George Bush Clinton race. And I really. There was so much about it that I knew nothing about. I mean, there's still a lot about it that I know nothing about, but there was so much about it that I knew nothing about, which is part of the reason I feel like it was a very successful endeavor for me, and entertaining to Tonight Show viewers, because I was asking questions that are were not highly intellectual questions. They were it's just stuff that I certainly didn't know. And here's an example. I was just shocked to find out. I mean, now it seems commonplace, but I was just shocked. I was standing backstage during the day at the Republican convention back then. So it was at the Houston Astrodome. So I'm in the bowels of the Astrodome, and this worker pushes past this big two-wheeler flat of Bush signs of I support Bush or whatever. They're all, and I was like, wow, they have the signs here. I had always believed, I mean, now when you see everyone carrying the same sign, it's clear that it was given to them there. But in the old days, I could swear people didn't they make the sign in their garage with magic markers and cardboard and a stick and or maybe some spray paint? I had always believed that these things happened organically. And what I discovered was the entire thing is theater.
Yeah.
I mean, even down to, it's funny because I was watching a couple of clips last night from the Republican convention, which is not easy to do.
Yeah,
but I was watching some clips last night, and I forget who was speaking, but it was people fairly, high up in the hierarchy. And the way they film it, you have no idea that no one in the crowd is listening to them. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't know how people even give their speeches at those things. Maybe towards the end of the convention, when it will be like the nominee or the vice presidential, nominee, when they speak, then people are listening. But the majority of the speeches that take place during the conventions, the person is on stage talking. People are wandering around, they're walking, they're talking, they're not paying any attention at all. But the way it's filmed, it looks like, and if, it takes a fairly good political performer to be able to sort of overcome the fact that no one's listening to them. Not only are they not listening, but they're being noisy while they're not listening.
That's an interesting phrase that you just used too, like political performer.
Yeah.
I think so much of the politics now has become the performance and isn't actually governing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, look it's not like I'm a political expert. I am not. And that's, again, part of what made those appearances for the Tonight Show entertaining, is I think I was asking questions of people that everybody kind of wanted to ask. But, once it's like once you're in the middle of things, you don't want to say, like, how does that work again? Why do they do that? Because you just feel like an idiot. And so I think, one of the big problems we have right now is that, how many people don't understand at all how the system works. For example, there are people who are angry with Biden because Roe v. Wade was overturned. And they feel because Biden's president, right, that it's Biden's Supreme Court. There are people who don't understand that, no, the Supreme Court gets built over time. And there's one person on that court that was appointed by Biden, and they are voting the right way on the issues. Right. So, but there are people who don't know that. And they don't know it because, once the ball gets rolling, nobody wants to stop it and go, explain to me about the Supreme Court again. So instead of admitting their ignorance and asking questions, they just act on their ignorance, that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. I mean, also, I think everybody has short-term memory loss. It's like people forget that Trump appointed 3 of those judges.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those judges voted, the same way.
Yeah.
So all 3
or the 2 that have been, for all practical purposes, bribed, that are owned by the, and the other thing is, we were just not raised to think this could happen. Every movie we've ever seen, there was a happy ending. There was some sort of silver lining, right? Even if the main character who's beloved dies, well, there's still what do you call it? There's still a,
ending for them.
There's something, they walk off into the distance with a, new, right. Something, what's the Tom Hanks movie where he's cast away in the, Yeah,
the island and comes back.
Yeah, at the end, he's lost his wife because she got married and began another life, and he loses her. And then he drives to deliver a package somewhere or something, and he meets a girl at an intersection, and then the last thing you see is his car going sort of towards where the girl went, and there's even in the saddest thing, there's always this like hope for the future. The idea that no, we're walking into a terrible, terrible thing, it just doesn't have room in anybody's brain, I don't think. I've read not all of Project 2025, but part of it. Okay, one of the things in this, and is that, okay, not only are they going to get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency, but in Project 2025, for those who don't know, is the blueprint that's been written for what will happen, what the plan is, should Trump take office again.
Policies that they want to introduce.
Yes. And so one of the things, all right, they're going to get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency, but the other thing is they will not allow the phrase climate change. Mm-hmm. Now, I assume they mean within the government, because I don't know how they restrict everybody else from saying climate change, but I think here's what I think. I think we could probably say, I'm at Clay Ainge, and they won't know what we're saying. So don't worry so much about that. But the fact that the government itself will not be, if you're not going to say it, then clearly you're not going to address it, which means that the world is literally going to end.
Even less so domestically. I mean, if he pulls us out of NATO, I mean, the threats of AI right now. I mean, there's just kind of an endless list of real threats heading towards us right now, and that administration is not prepared for that at all.
And I don't want to bum people out because there are some silver linings. For example, if the world is ending, you don't have to put away the leftovers. And I hate putting away leftovers. So there is that. So there are some bright spots.
Well, I have to say, you are an eternal optimist, I think. Throughout almost all your career. I mean, I've heard quotes from you as far as the bright side to nuclear war will be the resurgence of folk music.
I believe that nuclear war will bring back folk music. And I love folk music. So again, you're right. Another positive.
Being trapped under a beam under an earth during an earthquake for 3 days, you're at least going to lose weight. I mean, like, you have such great quotes.
Yeah, there are positives. A lot of people think of, being trapped beneath rubble as an entirely negative thing. It isn't. There's the weight loss. My kids, when my kids were little, they wanted those I acquiesced and got them those light up shoes, the little sneakers that when their foot hits the ground. And I did it mostly in case there was an earthquake. The idea that your kid is just blinking over on the other side of the room. I thought, see, that's
Found him. I got him over here.
that's not just decadence. That's safety.
That's safe. It's precautions.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, where does the optimism come from? Where do you get these takes from?
Well, really, I think it's more just a really dark sense of humor, which, which is, nature, it's not enough. I mean, we have to vote, and we may be called on to do more than just voting, but we certainly have to vote. We have to help one another, make sure your friends are registered to vote. Make sure you check that you're still registered, especially if you live in a red state, because they do like to purge the voting list. But nature did give us a coping mechanism, which is a sense of humor. And so when there's more to cope with, I think that it comes into play more.
I want to turn to the podcast really quick.
Yeah.
We were just kind of talking about, these kind of crazy existential threats that we have coming at us. And like one of the interviews on your podcast kind of veers into that direction. That was surprisingly with Kelly Carlin. Can you explain like why you had her on the show and like what was going on? Because some people might not know about what happened this year with that.
Let's see. Okay, so it actually is it's a little bit convoluted, which is some random podcaster, I think it was, a couple of young guys, supposedly had made an AI version of George Carlin, Kelly Carlin's father, and made a like a comedy concert out of it. And so she sued them. But it turns out that they didn't exactly use AI somehow. So, but the idea would be the same, which is, my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert, which is why I wanted Kelly Carlin to explain. I mean, because she sued them and won. Mm-hmm. She had success at this. What AI does is it gathers everything from that which has already been on the internet. Mm-hmm. So, that expression, if you're not getting paid on the internet, then you're the product. Mm-hmm. So it's that, like all of us that tweet things, post things of ourselves, make it right. All of that is the ingredients that go into any kind of AI thing, which means that we're all kind of ripped off. Mm-hmm. In the case of Kelly Carlin's father, it was specific to him. So
which, ironically, I mean, she even says that the podcasters were fans of him, which is, I think, so ironic because it's so antithetical to who he was as a person, as an entertainer.
Yeah, the AI thing is just so damn fraught.
Yes.
I don't, so many times, although, as I've said on my podcast, I very much enjoyed The Wheel, mm-hmm. And I use it almost every day. But so much of technology people celebrate just because it's new technology, with very and we're always sort of forced into it because that's what everyone's doing. And like I would argue that social networking has had a negative impact much more than it's had a positive impact. People will say, yes, but kids can communicate with other children from around the world. Well, yeah, but I don't think that's generally what they're doing. It's not generally like an exchange of cultural ideas. I don't think that's really the main way that it's been used. It's mainly been used in terms of kids, to make girls feel bad about their bodies and to, and to help the sex exploitation industry. Outside of that, it's not a lot of positives.
We had that thing this year where they had the mirror/camera in New York City and I think Ireland, and it had to immediately get shut down because all the New Yorkers kept flashing the camera.
Oh wait, what? So what was it?
It was a camera that linked all of the New Yorkers to everybody in Ireland and all the Ireland people to everybody in New York, so we could all see each other. And everybody just started like exposing their genitalia. And like,
I mean, it's really what's the matter with us? But I mean, what did anybody think that anybody was going to? I mean, you could have guessed that, right? You could have guessed that that's what would happen. Did you really think it was, going to be people exchanging recipes or, saying some meaningful, deep thing that, couldn't be acquired in another way? Probably not.
On your podcast, Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone, available everywhere you stream or listen to podcasts. You and your co-host, Adam Felber, along with Bonnie Burns and Tony Anita Hull, are always just having a fun time. But how do you guys actually start? Because you guys are always in this long debate about what makes a cold open. And I'm curious, like, what you guys do right before the cameras start rolling. What do you guys...
We're usually already talking before the cameras start rolling, and then somebody will go, "Oh, we should start." But we record. The episodes are a week behind, and it's part of the reason that it's not like we don't do a lot of current event. Like I couldn't get on yesterday, for example, and talk about Trump's large Band-Aid on his ear. Because who knows what'll have happened between now and that, even in a week.
If you're local to Long Island, New York, and need movie recommendations, subscribe to the Long Islander newspaper, where you can catch my movie reviews and theater write-ups every week. We cover everything from local businesses, food and drinks, town events, and sports. Subscribe at longislandernews.com for only $35 a year. The Works podcast is sponsored by Reset Lift. I love going to the gym, but I need the right clothes to go in. Our friends over at Reset Lift have created the perfect gym attire for you, because their whole goal is to inspire you to be the best version of yourself. Go to resetlift.shop/Scareworks right now to get exclusive offers on t-shirts, tanks, hoodies, shorts, joggers, sweatpants. You name it, they have it. Use discount code SCAREWORKS at checkout to receive 10% off on merchandise.
It's so absurd. I saw Lauren Boebert, a tweet from, Lauren Boebert posted a video of her saying, that shooting was Biden's fault, which is, we do a joke a lot of times, like, if something goes wrong, no matter what it is, if my dog's barking or if, if the cat poops on the rug, it's Biden's fault. Because, but this was like the extreme. It's Biden's fault. Okay, wait. Biden wasn't there. Biden has tried to get rid of those kind of guns, and the other, and the Republicans have pushed back. Biden hasn't engaged in violent rhetoric. It's just it's really like a joke.
Well,
it was Biden's fault.
I also love the idea that it's Biden's fault and that he's orchestrating these huge conspiracy theories, but he's also too old to function, right?
Yeah,
he's they want the best of both worlds there. It's like,
yeah, what Biden is? He's the catch-all drawer. He's the drawer in the kitchen where you put everything.
Yeah.
Right? You find something on a screw on the floor, and you're like, "Oh no, just put it," and it goes in that drawer of the kitchen. Biden is the catch-all drawer of all dissatisfaction, regardless of the topic. Very strange. And sometimes among Democrats too, unfortunately, but certainly among Republicans. Well, apparently the day after the shooting, he was golfing and had no bandage on his ear, but when he walked out at the Republican convention, he had the word Kotex was trending on Twitter for like a couple days because it really did look like he had taken, a feminine hygiene product and taped it to his ear. And what's interesting is that we have not had, normally in any other kind of, presidential, whether it was if they tripped and fell, and in such a way where they may have damaged themselves or, obviously tragically in the case of someone being shot, or any kind of, there would be a doctor would come out in front of a camera and give some sort of medical report. But no such thing has taken place, which I think is kind of suspect because I think the story that Trump is telling is not true. Either way, it's a terrible thing. It should never happen. Awful. But I do think that clearly he's going to play it for all it's worth. I by the time he makes his big speech at the convention, he will likely have like an ear cane of some sort, or an ear walker. He'll need a ambulating device for his ear. By that, he's definitely playing it for all it's worth.
The world might be a really dark place these days, but one of the brighter spots I had this year was I saw both Inside Out and Inside Out 2. And your character in Inside Out, who I believe is just forgetful, Paula.
It's Forgetter Paula.
Forgetter Paula, yeah.
That's my job, is to forget.
So one of the things that she does in the first movie is her and her colleagues send up a jingle, like a commercial jingle, every couple days, just to kind of like torture poor Riley, because it's like the commercial jingle that she keeps hearing on TV.
Yeah.
Do you, Paula Poundstone, have any commercial jingles that get stuck in your ear on a daily basis?
Oh, constantly. Yeah. Actually, when even as you're talking, it's funny. The one that comes into my head is not a real commercial jingle. It's from 101 Dalmatians, when the Baddens, who have collected all the Dalmatian puppies, and they're supposed to be taking them out to skin them for Cruella's coats, but instead they're watching television, and they're watching TV, and the television goes to a commercial, and it's for a product called Canine Crunchies, and it's Canine Crunchies can't be beat. Give your dog a happy treat. And when I first, that may have been the first movie I ever saw in my entire life. So really? In all those years,
it just stuck.
I still got it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I mean, I've seen the movie more than once.
Yeah.
Since then. But there's a point to this. Oh, so Forgetter Paula works. The whole premise of the movies Inside Out 1 and 2 are that it's the emotions within the kid's brain are given
personified into characters.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And ironically, I couldn't remember it. So they at different parts wander to different parts of the brain, and at one point they come to the memory part, and each memory is in this very beautiful sort of ball, like almost a little smaller than a bowling ball maybe. And so at one point joy and sadness come to the area where the forgetting gets done, and me and my partner Bobby Monahan confess that to one another. Actually,
Monahan's voice. I didn't even recognize his voice there. That's crazy.
Yeah, that we purposely just keep putting the memory of that jingle back in. It's funny because I have the worst memory in the world, and so the idea that I'm it's perfect that I'm playing the character that does the forgetting.
Both those films are so good.
They're really good, and
they're
you know
really so beautiful films.
they're timely.
Yeah.
They're visually stunning.
Yes.
It's great animation, really beautiful, but also very timely in terms of you know, the whole country is in the midst of a mental health crisis, and I saw Inside Out 2 probably a couple weeks ago, and there's like a recognition laughter among the audience. I mean, I saw it with a full theater. That recognition laugh where you're like, oh, I do that, or oh, I have that. And I think for in Inside Out 2, they introduced the emotion of anxiety.
Yes.
And they sort of, you know, explain the difference between fear and anxiety. Anxiety being like this fear of something that hasn't yet happened.
Yes.
And may or may not happen.
What I particularly loved about that is the depiction of anxiety trying to help. Like,
yeah.
She thinks that she's helping, and she's doing anything but.
Right.
It's
like autocorrect in the computer.
Yes.
You know, like, thanks, I'll do it myself. Thank you.
That's so true. It's so true. You know, I've been saying lately that the phones have gotten too smart, and they're trying to predict words that I'm not going to say.
Yes. Yeah. And also, by the way, when my computer or when I'm typing, right, you know, on the flat thing, and it'll guess a word, or even worse, in an email when it has these replies.
Yes.
I will change my mind about what I was going to say so that I don't use their damn reply.
I always fight the system.
I handwrite most things. I like to write letters, and you know, I handwrite letters. And in fact, my first book, there's nothing in this book that I meant to say. I wrote the whole thing by hand, multiple drafts.
Wow.
There's something about the drag on the pen that I find helpful. I think it's a different mental process than using the computer somehow.
That's work.
But you know, I do occasionally, because as I write a page, if I have like one cross out, I don't. That's okay. But if there's like two or three, well, I'll start over. But sometimes, you know, when I'm almost finished with something, and I'm about to write a word and I write the wrong letter, I have been guilty of trying to think of a word that starts with that letter that I could use, you know, as opposed to the word that I intended to write. You know what I mean? A synonym. And I can't help wondering if the framers did that when they were writing the Constitution. And was it, you know, after you've made this hugely flourished, you know, with your quill, and it's a messy process, and who wants to start all over again? So is it possible that they just meant, no guns?
Yeah. You know, it's so funny you bring that up. Like on your podcast, you actually just had a constitutional expert on. You had AJ Jacobs on, who is like what I'd probably call a good old fashioned nerd, which is somebody that we need more of lately. You know.
Oh yeah.
You know, he basically lived an entire year directly according to the Constitution. Even in his book, I believe he says that they spelled Pennsylvania wrong on the Constitution twice.
Oh, like, wow.
They spell it wrong, or two different ways on the Constitution itself. And it's like, that's, you know, I wonder if they just brushed over that, you know.
Yeah, they were just like, all right, you know what? I'm not rewriting that thing.
I'm not. This is too much work. This is a long page.
Yeah. He was great. He wrote a book called, I think it was The Year of Living Constitutionally, I think it was. Where he took, for example, one of the things in the Constitution, and I'm not an expert, obviously, but is about, I guess, the the British Army used to, like, you'd just be living your day, I guess, and some members of the British Army would show up and go, we need to stay here. And you were obliged to house them. So, so they made a part of, an amendment in the Constitution.
Yes.
That says,
right? It's like
so one of the things he did, it's actually not constitutional, come to think of it, is the opposite of, because he had a friend who was in the service who he had come stay with him. But I think his wife put the kibosh on it. So it was his wife who did the constitutional thing, not AJ. He did the opposite of. I believe he also did have a musket at one point, I think. Anyways, he was a delightful guest.
He was walking around New York City with a musket.
You know what? I'm totally in support of the Second Amendment. Go ahead, have a musket. I'm fine with that.
Exactly.
I feel none of the other kinds of guns that we have are covered.
Yep.
Because, all these originalists like to say, well, it has to be how they intended it. Well, they didn't know anything about, bump stocks or AK-47s or AR whatevers. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead. Have a musket. Have at it. Carry your, keep your powder dry.
I guess if anybody couldn't tell, right? I mean, you're doing stand-up, you have the podcast, you do voice acting. You obviously have this incredibly unique voice, and you've kind of always had this unique voice. When you were first starting out, did you have to learn like how to use it?
No.
No?
I mean, if you mean literally my voice, like the voice box.
Yeah.
No. I'll tell you what. Well, my voice has changed as the years have gone by. I did a HBO special years ago called Cats, Cops, and Stuff.
Yeah.
And somebody put a clip of it up on Twitter a while back, and I clicked on it and listened, and I'm like, who the hell is that? Because my voice has changed. It's, as the years have gone by, I'm heading in a Suzanne Plachette direction. Suzanne had a distinctly deep voice, which I think came from smoking, but I can't be sure about that. Here's what I've learned as I've since I started. Well, multiple things, but as a performer, for years I wanted to have some sort of a hook. I want to have something that was I don't know, like a hook. I don't know any other way of saying, like some sort of quirk that was just mine. And I hopefully I didn't hang on to that idea for too many years, but what I figured out when I first started doing open mic nights in Boston, which the premise of an open mic night is that anybody who wants to can go up for 5 minutes, right? So, you're supposed to go for 5 minutes. So I would write out my 5 minutes, and somewhere in my nervousness, I would often forget. And sometimes it wasn't even that. Sometimes in my anxiety, even before I began my 5 minutes, I would get on stage and blurt out something about the person who'd been on before me, or about something that I just saw in the room as I walked to the stage. Well, now I don't know how many minutes it took me to say that. And so I would be lost in time within seconds of hitting the stage. And therefore, I would end up doing a lot of just talking to the audience. Where are you from? What do you do for a living? Time honored. Where are you from? What do you do for a living? And as I used to take notes every time I did a set, I had carried a notebook, excuse me, and I would write down the date and the circumstances of where I was. And I would take these notes. By the way, not notes that I ever read again. So it was sort of wasted time, but I did. And
that's interesting.
One day while writing the notes, it dawned on me, because in the beginning, I felt like it was really bad that I couldn't stick to my 5 minutes, that this was a deficit, that this was a bad thing. And one day it dawned on me that the best part of my set, regardless of the fact that I have no idea how long the set was, that the best part of my set was the part where I was talking to the audience. And so then I shifted what I was doing. Instead of trying desperately not to do stuff in a spontaneous way, I tried to leave windows where I could do stuff in a spontaneous way. And also, as time went by, instead of desperately wanting some sort of a hook, I just made a somewhat conscious effort, I guess, to just be more and more myself on stage.
Yeah.
And that's, so as to the degree that I change as the years go by, it's only because, guess what? You change a little bit as the years go by, just in real life, even if I was a, heaven forbid, software designer.
So, when you think about Cats, Cops, and stuff, that won you your first Cable ACE award, which I think you were the first woman to win that at the time.
Probably. Of course, Cable ACE Awards couldn't have been around that long at that point.
Sure, but I mean, it's still a huge accomplishment. I mean, how long had you been working on that set before it was ready?
Oh, not very. And the same thing about that, which is, I had a set, where I wrote down on a piece of paper a list of pieces that I would do. But part of the reason that I did that in a very concrete way, had this list of pieces that I would do, was so that I had the, because I knew I would be nervous. And so I had the framework to return to anytime I jumped off. And because that show too, the best parts of it were the part where I was just talking to the audience, not stuff that is unique just to that night. There was a conversation I had with a woman. It's a long story to explain the whole circumstance of it, so I'll just do the shortened version, which is I was talking to a woman in the audience who confessed to me at my prodding that her mother had been in a car service station, fallen into a lube rack, and got her face torn off. And I can't explain why that was funny, but because she was telling us a true story. And I think part of it was my reaction, which of course was horror, especially because here I was doing a comedy show and now someone's told me this like god awful thing. But for some odd reason, it struck everyone in the audience as funny, and we howled. And to this day, there's the occasional person who comes up to me and says, "Are you going to do the lube rack thing?" And I always have to sort of, there is no lube rack thing. It was a conversation, but that's true for every, like when you have if I bump into my neighbor Meg on the street, there's things that we will say to one another that are part of a framework, right? How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. After we get out the I'm fine, then we tell how we really are, right? We move off the framework for a few seconds, exchange a few more things. Some of them are about, what we're experiencing together, which is, my God, it's hot today. And then it's, geez, they're not going to do anything about climate change if Trump gets it, right? Then we sort of move in these other directions. We'll say it's, a dog will walk by and my dog will lunge at it and I'll have to, pull the dog back. And then I tell the dog story, right? All these things, there's the framework. And then there's these jumping off places. And at the end of the conversation, I'll say, well, I better get going, which is how almost every conversation ends. Oh, yes, I've got to get going too. even if there's a reason or not that you have to get going, that generally is how we end. And then, all right, good to see you. Back to that, back to a framework. Stand up is the same way for me. But the Lubrac was not part of the framework. It was a weird story that somebody told me during the show. And that person doesn't come to all my shows. And even if she did, there's a point at which she wouldn't want to tell the Lubrac story anymore. It was gross.
After, Cats, Cops and stuff, you're hitting a stride, you're at a good point in your career. At that point, like, how do you start developing new material after that? Because I imagine, like, if you're going to clubs and trying out new stuff, you're well known at that point.
Yeah, all day long, I think of things that I think are funny, that I would like to tell to someone. And that was the case long before I was a stand-up. If I was separated from friends, if I was at home and my mother did or said something, horrible, later I would tell to a friend and, make jokes about. If something happened that was embarrassing to me while I was at the mall, catch up to my friends, I'd tell them the story, right? All the time, stuff happens. And I always thought of it in the framework of, or when I was away at basketball camp, it would be like, I'd write postcards about, and it was always, I had this sort of collection of things all the time that I thought were funny that I would want to share with somebody. So stand-up is no different. I carry with me on the clipped to my belt loop, I carry a pen, and in my back pocket, I carry a little notebook. And when when something happens or I have a thought about something, I write it down, and then I put it in my bigger notebook eventually and try it out on stage. And so that process has never really changed. I used to have a friend who stayed with me sometimes who was a comic, and she would go into the living room sometimes and rehearse. And I was like, what are you doing? And I'm rehearsing. She would write a whole set. I know she was a headliner at the time, so she would write 45 minutes to an hour of material. And then she would go rehearse it in an empty room until she memorized it and then take it on stage. And I don't know how long that set, I don't know if she did that same set for a year, 2 years. I have no idea. I don't think I asked. I don't have anything like that. I have 45 years of material rattling around somewhere in my brain. And while I'm on stage, whatever I can remember to say, I say. As I think of new things, they tend to be at the top of my brain, especially if it's something that is time sensitive. If it's if it's about Trump's odd ear bandage. The truth is, with Trump, because he's such a fire hose of horror, the stuff he does, you'd have to talk about it within the frame of time where he's done it, because there's new stuff a day later, the day after that. He's always doing some new horrible, god awful thing and I think it's a technique he has. Not just that he does things, he says things that are horrible. And I think he does it intentionally to sort of so that it was sort of like the debate, it's just this fire hose of lies. And I think it's very hard when addressing him directly to get a handle on which thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I have a chronic cough.
No, you're fine. It's okay. So, I think that also brings us to another good point, which is comedy is kind of at this interesting moment culturally. There is this big divide on, between comedians, and I think what is acceptable to say and what isn't, or what should be said and what shouldn't be. I mean, even recently, Kathy Griffin was at the Paramount that you're going to be performing at, and there was a Trump rally outside of the theater protesting her.
Gosh, yeah. Well, and both are welcome to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They can protest outside the theater, and Kathy Griffin can say whatever she wants. That's the deal. That's where we live. And by the way, if Trump gets in office, it won't be where we live for very long, because one of the things will be, he already wanted to shoot people during peaceful protests.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be damn sure that, especially based on what the Supreme Court just did with the immunity ruling,
mm-hmm.
he'll do it.
Yep.
Before there were some forces there that stopped him, but those forces won't be there anymore. And so that's another reason to vote blue all the way down the ballot, by the way. You can't just, a lot of voters like to do this thing where they go, well, I voted for a Democratic president. And so then I, to balance it out, I voted for Republicans in the Senate and the Congress. No. Because that just hamstrings that, and then they wonder why nothing gets done. We are at a crisis point. You must vote blue all the way down the ballot, or else there will be no more peaceful protests, and there will be no more, whether you like her or not, there'll be no more Kathy Griffins, because the freedom of speech thing is just Trump doesn't want freedom of speech. Yeah, he wants everyone to agree with him. What did he say about he was with Kim Jong-un, and when he came home, he said one of the things he noticed was that when Kim Jong-un walked by, all the people had to stand up. And Trump said, I'd really like my people to do that.
Yes.
You know what? Not with a fucking gun to my head.
Yeah.
I would not.
Absolutely.
But that's what he wants. Because that way now the way our country works is that if you don't like Trump, you can say it. You can express it by not attending his functions. You can go someplace else and say, whatever you want to say about him. Not violent things, of course, but outside of that. And he's an egomaniac. He can't handle the idea that there are people don't like him. So one of the first things he's going to do is shore that up. Make sure that everyone has to say.
I mean, that's included
that they like him.
That's included in Project 2025. Their Schedule F policy, in which they want to turn the government workers into political appointees.
And by the way, they are already interviewing people for those positions. The plan in Project 2025 is to, I forget how many thousands, but to fire literally thousands of government workers. And we're talking about people who've done these jobs for years under every administration, Democrat or Republican, because they're experts at their jobs.
Well, they're
and Trump just wants people who will say, yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I do kind of want to ask you about, I actually watched this before, after I sent your questions over. So this actually didn't make it onto the question sheet. But, the other night I watched Look What the Cat Dragged In. And I actually found it to be, I think, my favorite stand-up special from you.
Thank you.
I thought that was a really, really excellent set. And it's no secret that at that time there was a lot of pressure, I think, on you. Or certainly it was a rough time.
Yeah. I just come out of rehab. I just come out of a bunch of legal trouble. Yeah.
I mean, when you were walking out to film that set, did you have any different feeling or anxiety walking out to do that one? Or were you just as cool as a cucumber as you usually are on stage?
Can't really remember any longer, but I know that it was a really terrific audience. So, within seconds of walking out, I felt like comfortable where I was.
Yeah.
And and that makes all the, I always say to, when I do a show and I come off and people go, oh, that was really great. I always say, thank you. The audience was really terrific. And that makes all the difference. It's really hard to play to assholes. So if you're working to people who aren't fun, it's not that I can't do it, but it's not the same as working to like a really great fun crowd. And certainly the crowd that night, I think that was at the Warner Theater in Los Angeles, was really fun.
Yeah, I can't recommend that special enough to people that haven't seen it. I mean, it is, you will squeal with laughter. It is very funny.
People come up to me, not infrequently, still to this day, with concern. So I had said, let's see, there was a woman's voice in the audience, I think, that somehow attracted me. And I said, got my attention. And I asked her, I said, how did you, who are you with? Maybe something like that.
Is
right?
This the Job It girl?
No. This is the woman who says, well, this is my fiance.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, oh, and I think I might have asked where they met or something like that there. And then I said, who, or maybe I was talking to him by this time. I can't remember if I was talking to him or to her. Maybe to her. But I said, who proposed to whom? Or to whom? Because I was under the impression, I think in recent years, I feel like there has been this, I don't know if it was because of the Spider-Man movie with his aunt's ring. But I feel like there's been this renewed, like the guy on one knee and the proposal is some big deal. I think that there were years where it's two people that were already living together, hopefully, because otherwise, what are you walking into? It's two people that were already living together that, maybe even for tax reasons, one night decided, hey, what do you say? Don't you think we should? And then they get married and have a big wedding. Lovely. That's what I was thinking about, But so I say to the woman, I go, well, who proposed to who? And the guy was offended. And he says, what kind of question is that? And I was so shocked by his response. And I can't remember if I tried to explain why I was asking the question. I don't recall any longer, but it became this very funny thing within the show. What kind of question is that? And people all over the country have come up to me at one time or another and said, what do you, they were worried about that woman. Just when the guy reacted in such an asshole-ish way, people were just like, well, I don't think she should marry him.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, that very night. I mean, that very night in the theater, there was a little after party. A lot of people came up to me that night asking, as if I knew anything about the woman and her fiance. I didn't know any more than these people now knew from that little exchange. We weren't friends. We don't hang out. But all these years later, people will still say, I wonder if they got married. I wonder how that works.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, if you're listening out there, let us know. Did you get married?
Yeah, we'd love to know. And how's it going?
Give us an update.
That's the most important question is, how's it going?
So that finally brings us to your show at the Paramount. You're going to be coming here on August 9th. What are you talking about on your current tour?
Let's see. Well, I talk about a house full of animals. I talk about my house full of animals. I talk about I can't help but talk about travel. I know everybody makes fun of comics for talking about travel, but honestly, it's probably about a third of my life. I talk about trying to pay attention to the news well enough to, cast a halfway decent vote. I talk about, I often don't know what I'm going to talk about because I do the time-honored, where are you from, what do you do for a living? And in this way, when people talk to me, what happens is I use whatever they say to kind of set my sails. And so I go in the direction that the conversation with individuals takes me. And sometimes they'll say something that reminds me of a piece of material that, from somewhere in the 45 years I've been doing this in my head, a piece of material. Sometimes that happens. Other times, and more likely, I go along a track that is unique just to that night, and that is not a piece of material, something that will not be repeated. It's only just that night in conversation with this person. But so a lot of times the truth is, I don't really know.
So, I mean, when you go into a theater like that, and it's going to be, I guess, mostly like crowd work, do you get do you peek out before the show starts?
Oh, heavens, no.
No.
It's funny because sometimes when I get to the theater, and I often arrive before the doors open, not always, but often. And they'll say to me, like if I'm there before the doors have opened, they'll say to me, "Do you want to see the stage?" And I go, "No," because it doesn't matter. If I go out and I go, "Boy, I don't like this," what are you going to change everything? Are you going to take down the curtain? Are you going to redecorate the theater? No, I got to go out and tell my little jokes. I mean, unless you have I don't know, unless there's some sort of the backdrop of this stage, if you have some sort of weaponry out there, then I would probably say no, take that off. But outside of that, it's me, a microphone. I ask for a stool. Some theaters have a lighting guy that does lovely things. Sometimes there's a rug. Sometimes there isn't. I don't much care. So no, I don't look out early.
Do you have any formula as far as how you pick on who you're going to talk to?
None whatsoever. My manager for years used to tell people that I had some sort of sixth sense about who to choose. I'm like, that couldn't be more incorrect. Sometimes sometimes I've said, maybe I've done a joke and somebody responds not just with laughter, but says something right in their enthusiasm, and I might turn towards that. Sometimes I might ask a rhetorical question, and someone, blurts out a non-rhetorical answer, and that might take my attention. Sometimes it's because in my head I realize, oh my gosh, I've just been focusing somehow on this side of the audience. I need to focus on this side of the audience, and I will just intentionally, pick somebody in another section. But no, I have no sixth sense. I happen to have really terrific audience members. I wouldn't trade my audience. It's not the biggest audience in the world, but it is the best audience in the world. The only thing I wish about them is that there was more diversity.
Okay.
But the people, that's not the fault of the people that come. Some people don't come. But they're just so much fun to talk to. And it wouldn't matter which person I chose.
Yeah.
They're all really fun to talk to.
Yeah. Well, look, if you want to talk to Paula at her upcoming show at the Paramount, tickets will be available in the description at the link that I provide. I want to thank Paula Poundstone for coming on the show today. You can also catch her podcast every Monday.
It drops on Tuesdays, but the great thing about a podcast is if you go to paulapoundstone.com, every episode is just there waiting for you right on the homepage, paulapoundstone.com. There's something like 314 episodes up. So you can start with 314, or you can start with number 1, or you can start at number 200. I don't think it matters. I don't think it builds.
That whole group is great too. Adam, Bonnie, Tony, they're all really fun to listen to.
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
No, yeah, they're all a joy, especially your cold opens. I love you guys bantering back and forth. But please check Paula out. This has been such a pleasure having you here. Thank you for doing this, and I hope
Yeah.
to see you at the Paramount.
All right, cool. It's great fun talking with you. You take care.
Great fun. Thank you. You too.